In the heart of an endless night, the world seemed swallowed by darkness. Shadows stretched in every direction, whispering doubts and fears. Amid the silence, a tiny candle stood alone, its wick trembling as if aware of its own insignificance. It flickered, a fragile glow barely piercing the void. The wind of uncertainty whispered, "You are too small. You cannot change anything." The candle's flame wavered, threatened to extinguish, and for a moment it considered surrendering to the vast darkness. Yet somewhere deep within, a spark of courage stirred. Though it was only a faint light, it held a quiet promise. Even the smallest glow could confront the dark. With a gentle sway, the candle began to shine steadily, as if whispering to itself, "I may be small, but I exist. I can make a difference, even if just a little." In that instant, hope was born in the midst of the night. The small flame began to flicker more noticeably, swaying with every quiet breath of wind. It wasn't strong, it wasn't steady. Each movement felt like a question: can I survive this? The darkness pressed in from all sides, heavy and patient, as if waiting for the light to give up. For a brief moment, the flame shrank, almost disappearing into a thin line of orange. The forest grew colder, the silence felt deeper. But the candle did not go out. Instead, it gathered itself, drawing strength from the very wick that held it upright. The flicker became a rhythm, fragile yet persistent. The light may have been small, but it was alive. And as long as it was alive, it carried possibility. The darkness hadn't changed. The night was still vast. Yet something subtle had shifted. The flame was no longer just reacting to the wind. It was learning how to move with it. As the flame steadied, the forest did not fall silent. Instead, the shadows seemed to lean closer, stretching longer across the ground. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They whispered, "You're still small. The night is still endless. What difference can one light make?" The candle felt the weight of those quiet voices. The darkness wasn't trying to blow it out anymore. It was trying to convince it to fade on its own. For a moment, the flame trembled, not from wind, but from doubt. It looked around at the vast trees, their tops disappearing into the night sky. The world was so much bigger than its small circle of light, so much colder, so much quieter. But then the candle noticed something simple. Within its small glow, the ground was visible. The moss shimmered softly. The air felt warmer. The darkness remained. Yet inside that fragile circle of light, life could breathe. The candle did not grow larger. It did not suddenly blaze like the sun, but something quiet began to change. Its light stretched a little farther than before. Not much, just enough to touch the roots of a nearby tree. The rough bark softened under the warm glow. Tiny lines and textures, once hidden, slowly revealed themselves. A small patch of moss shimmered gently. Dew resting on the leaves caught the light and sparkled like distant stars. What had seemed empty was not empty at all. It had simply been unseen. The candle realized something simple but powerful. It didn't need to conquer the whole forest. It only needed to light what was within reach. The darkness still surrounded everything beyond its glow, but inside that widening circle, details emerged, shapes formed, life stirred. The flame flickered, not in fear this time, but in quiet understanding. Even a small light, when steady, begins to reveal a world that was always there. As the candle continued to glow, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the darkness, a small movement stirred. A tiny moth drifted into the circle of light, wings fragile and uncertain. It hovered for a moment, drawn not by force, but by warmth. Soon after, another followed. The candle hadn't called them. It hadn't tried to be brighter than it was. It simply existed, steady and present. And somehow, that was enough. Within its glow, the air felt softer. The ground no longer seemed cold. The forest, once silent and distant, felt a little more alive. The candle realized it wasn't lighting the darkness to prove anything. It was lighting it because that was its nature. And in doing so, it became a quiet invitation. Not to conquer the night, not to defeat the shadows, but to remind others that warmth still existed, even here. The moth did not stay alone for long. From deeper within the forest, faint glimmers began to appear, tiny reflections catching the candle's glow. At first, they seemed accidental, a droplet of dew shining on a leaf, a smooth stone reflecting a spark of gold. But then, something more intentional happened. A small, unlit candle lay half-buried near a tree root, forgotten and cold. The steady flame leaned closer, carried gently by the wind. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, softly, quietly, the second wick caught fire. The forest did not erupt in brightness. There was no sudden blaze, just two small flames standing side by side. The darkness was still vast, but it no longer felt untouched. The first candle understood something new. Light does not lose itself by being shared. It does not grow weaker when it ignites another. Instead, it multiplies, without noise, without force, simply by passing warmth forward. With two flames now glowing, the forest felt subtly different. Not brighter in a dramatic way, but gentler. The shadows no longer pressed as close. They softened at the edges, losing their sharpness. The two candles stood side by side, their flames moving in a quiet rhythm. When the wind passed through, they swayed, but together they steadied each other. The light stretched farther than before, touching the trunks of nearby trees, warming the damp earth beneath them. More details began to appear: the curve of fallen branches, the shimmer of dew on moss, the faint outline of a narrow path that had always been there. The darkness had not disappeared. It still filled the distance beyond the glow. But something fundamental had shifted. The night no longer felt endless, because now, where there had once been only one fragile flame, there was companionship and a growing circle of light that quietly refused to fade. As the circle of light expanded, the forest began to reveal something it had been hiding all along. Between the roots and fallen leaves, a narrow path slowly appeared. It wasn't grand or dramatic, just a simple trail, barely visible before. The two candles did not rush toward it. They simply continued to glow, and with every steady flicker, more of the path became clear. Small stones marked the edges, gentle curves guided the way forward. The darkness still surrounded the forest, but it no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like distance, waiting to be discovered, one step at a time. The candles understood something quietly profound. They didn't need to see the entire journey. They only needed enough light for the next step. And somehow, that was always enough. The light continued to spread, not in sudden bursts, but in quiet persistence. More small flames appeared along the path, each one catching fire from another. No flame shouted for attention. None tried to outshine the rest. They simply burned, steady, warm, present. And slowly, the forest responded. The air no longer felt heavy. The mist thinned. The once intimidating shadows softened into gentle silhouettes. What had seemed like endless darkness now revealed depth, texture, and space. The trees stood tall, not as looming threats, but as silent witnesses. The path stretched farther than before, no longer hidden. It had always been there, waiting for light to uncover it. The candles did not defeat the night. They did not erase the darkness entirely, but together they transformed how it felt. Because sometimes the world does not need overwhelming brilliance. It only needs enough steady light to change the way we see it. By morning, the forest had not become daylight. The night still existed beyond the trees, but within the path now lined with gentle flames, something undeniable had changed. What began as one trembling candle had become a quiet constellation of light. No flame was extraordinary on its own. None were powerful enough to conquer the forest alone. Yet together they reshaped the night. The first candle understood at last it was never meant to eliminate the darkness. It was meant to stand against it, however small it felt. To glow because that was its nature. To shine even when the world remained vast and uncertain. The forest did not need a blazing sun. It needed courage that endured. And sometimes that courage looks like a single flame choosing not to go out. Because even the smallest light, when steady and shared, can gently transform the darkest places into something navigable, something hopeful.